Oops. All right, I don't know how many, if any of you, had a chance to look yesterday at what I did yesterday, but let me just give you a quick rundown. The Tuesday night, literally, I spent about 3 hours comparing my version of the quarterly sales app that we had done together with the one I did last year that worked. I found probably a good half dozen places where there were inconsistencies. So I wrote them down. And then yesterday I went over and put all those changes in. And it still didn't work. And like I said, so what I did, and I even kind of put it like this yesterday, was that I kind of figuratively put myself out there naked and said, okay, I'm going to even use the author's version, and I'm going to compare my version with the author's. And were there discrepancies? Yeah, but they were really basically, at least, they were very minor things, wording and the like. And I still couldn't get it to work. So what I have asked is that with all of you, do the best you can on this. All right. And if for some reason you can't get it to work, just turn in what you have. All right. Again, there's a good chance. Now we're going to go over today. We're going to finish up chapter 12. All right. And we are going to do the problem at the end of chapter 12, which is the updated trips log. I don't know what we're going to do in 13, 14, 15, and 16. I'm not sure. All right. I will let you know once I figure that out. All right. But the plan, just so you know, is today to finish up with chapter 12. Tomorrow to do that updated trips log. And there's quite a bit of code to put in there. All right. Some of it I may end up giving you. We'll see. But if we don't finish that tomorrow, we'll finish it on Monday. But ideally, at least, we'll finish it tomorrow, because what I want to do next week is I want to go into the author's, or chapter 13 in the book, which is a full-fledged bookstore website. Now, I changed the bookstore database data that they had to my own data. All right. So what we're going to do is right now, we're going to take a quick look. This thing I gave you today, all right, these are configure files, and don't worry about those yet, but we will be using them in just a few minutes. So what I'd like everybody to do, because we're all going to do this. Now, the question is, okay, Jeff, we're all going to do this. Are we turning this in? The answer is no. We're going to do this bookstore database, but no, you won't have to turn it in. Unless, I decide, you know what, maybe we'll just have you turn this in for chapter 13 and nothing else. I don't know right now. All right. It's funny because I just finished 2 Zoom meetings. The first one was on our healthcare provider that we have for people here at Rankin, and they gave everybody the wrong Teams URL. So we're all sitting in there trying to figure out how to get it to work, and we did. And then there was another meeting, which was our staff meeting. And the staff meetings are always fine, except that probably 80 to 85% of the staff meeting was on the IT program. So it was on the hardware classes. Now I feel like it's my job to sit there and sit through it, and I did. So let's just get going. Now I want to mention something if you look on the screen right here, okay? Okay, they're going to talk about entity classes. We're going to build those right now. Ours will look similar to theirs. It won't look identical. All right. I will go over the context file with you. Then I will go over these configuration classes with you. What you're going to notice in just a couple moments, again, we'll have our own version of this, so don't worry about it. But when we get there, what you'll notice is this is our context file right here. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up taking our data and put it into our author data will be in a configure authors file. All right. Our books data will be in a configure books file. Our book author data, and don't even worry right now about what that is, will be in a book authors file. All right. And those I've given you already. Now, you may have noticed that I sent it out to you a couple days ago, and then I upgraded it and sent it out yesterday or the day before, but I found there were plenty of errors in it. So I went and cleaned it out this morning, and now those files should come up when we get to that point with no errors. All right. You're going to have to make just a couple changes, but literally they're very minor, minute types of changes. So what I'd like everybody to do, and again, this will be what we're going to end up doing, not only in chapter 12 here, but also in chapter 13. So I'd like you to please create a folder and just call it, hopefully I don't have one with this name, call it bookstore. Yes, I do. So I'm going to move the one that I've got. So let's see where that is over here. I don't need that, at least not right now, so I'll just put it in here. All right, so let me try that again. So I'm creating a new folder and I'm naming it bookstore. All right, there it is. All right, then I'm starting up Visual Studio. Create a new project. Says something did not load correctly. Restarting Visual Studio should help this. So let me restart. All right, so I'm creating a new project. As always, it'll be an ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. And I'm going to call this thing Bookstore. The same thing as the name of my folder, but I'm going to call the solution name Bookstore V1, just in case we end up dinking with it later. We'll see. But again, make your project name please be Bookstore, and I'm going to put it into a folder on my desktop that is named Bookstore. All right. Okay. So Bookstore, Bookstore, Bookstore V1. Next, I'm going to leave everything just the way that it is and click Create. What I'm concerned with in the next half hour to hour is just creating the database stuff we'll need for the program. We're not going to go any farther with that today than this. Now, hopefully, I've gotten, for lack of better words, a few smarts over the semester. All right. I need a lot of smarts, but hopefully I started. What do I mean? Well, I'm going to open up my appsetting.json file. We've done this multiple times, but what I'm going to do next then, these are all my old ones, so don't worry about this. In fact, I'm going to close these in just a moment. All right. Let's get to that file. Where are you? There it is. So I copied, for example, that is not it. That is it. I copied my connection string. I copied my builder services. I copied my bookstore context. I copied all that stuff so you don't have to watch me flounder. So I'm going to grab this, which is in my appsettings.json file, and I'm going to paste it in. All right. I do not have a bookstore right now. I do not have a bookstore database. So I came in, like I said, I copied it in. I called it bookstore context. If you would rather, let's make it one word. There we go. So bookstore context, our typical server, the database is bookstore, our trusted connection, and our multiple active result sets. Nothing new there whatsoever. All right. So File, Save All. All right. Now, the next thing I would typically do would be to come in here to program and add that stuff. I do have it, but I'm not going to add it yet. I'm first going to go into the NuGet Package Manager, and I'm going to load in my packages. All right. And again, I have been loading in 3 of them, even though I think one of them is probably unnecessary. So the first one I'm going to load in here is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, which is probably the one that's not necessary. So I'm going to install that one and accept. Next, I'm going to browse and I'm going to find the Microsoft Entity Framework Core.tools and load that one and accept. And finally, I'm going to do the SQL Server. All right, and load that, and again, accept. All right, close that. I'm going to reopen it just to double check and make sure that all 3 packages have been loaded. Sorry, try that again. And there they are, so I'm good. And you know this already, but the big reason that I did that, we're going to get an error when we put in this file right here because we don't have a bookstore context yet. We'll build that next. And the thing about the bookstore context that you already know. All right. So the thing about that is, it needs to have certain things set up. All right. And you need, for example, you need to come in and put in you're using Microsoft.Entity Framework. We can do that now because we've added those packages. All right, so let me put this in, and again, I've copied it. So I've got that right here. And again, we put it in right after our build controllers with views. So I'm going to add that here. And right now I'm getting 1 error, and that's okay. All right. In fact, if I do come up here and bring in, well, I've got the Entity Framework Core. So it says the type or namespace bookstore content could not be found. It's because the file does not yet exist. But I did my builder.services.addDB context. All right, and we're going to do that in just a moment. So that error will go away. And again, I called it bookstore context here, and I called it bookstore context here. And you already know this. This is your connection string, so that has to match whatever you put in here. All right. Okay, so I've got those 2 things are done. I'm just going to do a file save all for now. And then I'm going to come over to my models. And in my models, the next thing that I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to build this context file. All right. Now, when we build it, I'm going to give you the entire file. I want to say that again. I'm going to give you the entire file. All right. When we go into our on model creating, we're going to put in 4 lines of code. Every code line that's in there will give us an error. And that's because we haven't created the associated files yet. Don't worry about it. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create those, and then I'm going to take those 4 lines and comment them out. All right. So again, under models, I'm going to come in and add a new class, and it'll be the bookstore context. .cs class. Now, this isn't the way we've always done it in here. All right, several times we've come in fact, most times, if not almost all times, we've come in and built the tables first, or the classes that will become the tables. All right, but I'm just doing it, I'm just switching it up a little bit in here, that's all. All right. So the first thing, and again, I'm going to put in the constructor, but you know what? Again, I saved it and already created it. All right. So there it is. So there is the constructor. I don't exactly like the way it lines stuff up here. So I'm going to add it like this. Now, it's giving me an error because I decided to make it bookstore with a lowercase. So those have all been fixed. Not sure why I'm getting this. I'm not going to worry about it right now. All right. In fact, I'm getting that because I don't have an ending paren here. All right. So don't worry if there's anything in here. So it's public, bookstore context, DB context, options, bookstore context, options, colon, base, options, paren, or curly. All right. I don't know if I put this on a line by itself, if that'll fix that or not. No. All right. So I don't know you right now what the problem is. We'll fix it though, honest to goodness. I'm not worried about it. But the next thing we're going to do, as we always do, is we're going to come in and make our DB sets. We're going to make 3 of them. You can put it alphabetically or whatever. I'm going to put them in the order I'm going to create them. So I'm going to create one called genre. And of course, we'll call it genres with a get set. Now, of course, I get the error because we don't have that yet. All right, so, but it's okay. Public, then the next one I'm going to create will be DB set book. And it'll be, whoops, not bookstore, book. And it'll be books. And again, with a get set, and again, I get an error. And finally, public DB set, and this will be authors. Author, sorry. And it'll be called authors with, again, a get set. Now, if that bothers you, that we've got these errors, just comment the lines out. It doesn't matter. We will uncomment them very, very, very shortly. All right. All right. Now we're going to basically do our on model creating. This is where we normally would put in our seed data. So I'm going to do my protected, override, void, on model creating, model builder. And again, I'm going to put in 4 lines right now that will all reference files that do not exist. All right, so as soon as I put those in, I'm going to comment those out as well. All right. In fact, I'm going to copy this. All right, so there they are. They're all in error right now. So this will become books. This will become authors. And this will become book authors. And again, for now, I will just comment all of those lines out. I'm not doing anything with this anyway. I'm getting that error now, as it says, no suitable method found to override, protected, override, void, on model creating. This is correct. All right. Now, the only thing that does still bother me is this, so let's take a quick look. Public, bookstore context, DB context options, bookstore context, options, colon base, options, curly. All right, I'm going to leave it exactly the way it is for right now. And we're going to come in and we're going to create our 3 classes. Okay, just so you know, we're not going to create a class for this one. Rather than us creating a class, we're going to let the system do it for us. This will be our many-to-many relationships, because many books can have many different authors of the same book, and many authors can be authors of many books. All right. So this will be the first time we will be instituting in here a many-to-many relationship. All right. So let's go in and let's first start by creating these things right here. So these errors will go away, or hopefully they will. All right. So models, add class. The class will be genre.cs. There it is. All right. Now, we're going to put in something new that we've never put in here before. What do I mean? We're going to put a constructor in here. So I'm going to type in this public genre. Now, it's not going to like it. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix all of it in just a moment. All right. But the first thing is this has to be books, not bookstore. Now, why is it giving us the error? Probably I should have done the books one first. It's totally fine. All right. So what is this? Okay. What is this? Well, basically this line that's right here, remember, we could write that. And if it's easier for you to understand, we could write that like this. That's the same thing. So in other words, this is our constructor. And what we're doing in here is we are setting up a new hash set of type book, and we are calling it books. All right, I'm going to go back and do it because this is the way the book shows it. So I'm going to do it like that. I mentioned this the other day, but I want to say it again, and that is the fact that a hash set is like a list that we've been using thus far. The difference between a hash set and a list is a list can have duplicate entries, a hash set cannot. So we're assuming we can't have the same book in here more than once. All right. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, the good news is we're only going to have a couple fields in here, but we have to put some decorators in here. Now, please don't type this. Just give me a second here. In the textbook, they did this. All right. In other words, they came in here and said that the max length that you're going to have in here is going to be 20. All right. You might say, well, who cares? You should care because the way I set it up, because I set up my own database, 20 wasn't big enough. So I made it 50. And that's when I got the whole database to work. All right. So the max length is 50. The field will be required. Let's see, what do we got here? That is not correct, of course. And now it is. All right. We'll also have from the last chapter a remote thing in here where we'll be checking the genre. And again, when we get errors, these errors hopefully are going to be working their way out as we add more things here. And I'm following what was in the book. All right. This will be a public string genre ID with a get set, and we are going to actually initialize it to string.empty. All right, now a couple things about this. This is the method that we want to call. This, I believe, is the controller that we want to call it in, and this is where it's going to live. So in other words, this is going to be something we're going to be putting into an admin area. All right. Why? Because in chapter 13, the bookstore app that you create, the one that we're setting the data up and everything for right now, will actually have authorization and authentication. It'll have both. So you will authenticate, and then if you are have been authenticated, then if you're authorized, you'll be able to go in and add a new genre. But in the past, you know this, anyone's been able to go in and perform CRUD operation. That will change with this particular app that we're going to be creating. All right. The other field that's in here, it'll have a string length of 25. Again, it will be required. It's going to be the genre name. All right, so. All right, and that'll be another string. We'll just call it name, and of course it'll have our typical get set in here. And again, we will initialize that to string dot empty. Empty. There we go. Now, we will have a navigation property in here. Okay, we will have a navigation property in here. My guess is when we put in this line of code right here, we're probably going to get another error. When we get done with this, we're going to immediately do the books, and hopefully that'll fix that error. We'll see. But this is a navigation property, so it'll be public, and it'll be an iCollection, and it'll be a collection of books. So I'll type book, that will be called books. And again, with a get set, just like that. So notice we have two errors in here right now, one here and one here. And in both cases, it's looking for a class called book. It really wouldn't matter too much which one of these we did first. If we did book first and then genre and then author or some version of that, we're going to get some errors because virtually all of them are referencing tables that we can only create one at a time. So we've got this one. So I'm going to do a file, save all. I'm going to go into my models folder here, and I am going to add another class, and it will be called book.cs. All right. So we've got genre. So let's do book, which is a little bit more work, not that much. All right. So what does this have in it? Okay. The first thing we're going to put in here is we're going to put in another constructor. But now we're going to be referencing the authors class, which we have not created yet. All right. So book. Notice now we don't get the error, but now we will. So authors, because it doesn't know what the heck authors is, equal new hash set, and it'll be a new hash set of type author. And like I said, we're going to keep getting errors in here while we're working on this. Okay, don't worry about that. They should flush their way out once we've got all three of the tables created and all four of our configure files created. All right, I've run through this before and it all worked. So what do we have in here? All right, well, we're going to have an ID, as you'd guess, but every book will have a title. Every book will have a price, and that's all they basically put in, and a genre. So that's what they put in to the ones that were in what the author showed you. I've changed it So now what we're going to have is an ID, followed by a title, followed by a genre ID or our foreign key, followed by a price, followed by an image. So we'll be able to use images, followed by a summary. All right. Then we'll have both a navigation property and a skip navigation property. All right. So let's get going. So I'm going to have here to start with public int book ID with our get set. That's pretty obvious. That's our primary key. All right. Then next we're going to have title, which will be required. And again, I'm following the lead from what they said in the book. They gave it a max length of 200. And that actually might sound like quite a lot, but with some books, you probably have noticed this if you've read enough, and I'm sure you all have, that you get a title and then immediately under that they have a subtitle. And sometimes that's considered the entire title, excuse me. So that's why we're doing it like this. So a public string title with a get set and set it to string.empty. All right, so that's what we have in here so far. Next, we'll have our foreign key. I'll put a comment here that says foreign key. And that will be the genre ID, which again will be required. So each book must have an associated genre. All right, and that is a string. All right, so that's what we have so far. So we put in an ID, we put in a title, and we put in a genre ID. All right. Next, we're going to put in a price. Now, technically, we don't have to put in a required there because we're going to put in a range. All right. And since we're putting in a range, there has to be something in there. This is going to be a double. Now, in the book, they did it like this. They said 0.0 and then 1,000,000.0, which is okay to do. All right, which says you have to have something in there. I'm going to just change this to 0.01. So for instance, the cheapest book, and I don't know why you'd have one like that, would be a penny. All right, and we're going to have an error message here that just is equal to book price must be greater than or equal to 0. We move this over. All right. And again, this will be a public double price with, as always, our get set. We will not give it any kind of a default value. All right. Now, I have provided for each one of the books, and we'll have about 120 books. All right. I have provided an image for each one of these. I have provided a summary for each one of these. But if we added a new book, it is possible that we don't have an image yet, and or it's possible we don't have a summary yet. So for both these, I just did a public, no decorating, string, image with a get set, equal string.empty, And the same thing for this summary. Like that. All right. Now, again, as I mentioned, we still have both a navigation property and we have a skip nav. All right. So we'll do the navigation first. I'll even put a comment here. Navigation property. And that'll be, we don't want to validate this. So this will be a validate never. All right. And I don't know how it did all that, but it did. So let me get rid of that. And it'll be a public genre with a question mark, genre, as always with our get set. And then we'll have our skip nav. And that'll be a public iCollection. Again, we're going to end up getting an error here of authors, author, yep. That will be called authors with a get set. So that's everything now that we have in books. All right. I did this a bunch of different ways. And like I said, you're going to get errors until we have everything here flushed out. All right. Are you caught up?
Yes, I'm there.
Great. All right. So I'm going to do a save all here, and I'm going to add the last one on here, which is our author. All right. The good news is I don't think we're going to come up with any problems with this one. All right. So instructor. So notice now when I do this, well, I don't know why it's doing that, but okay. Equal new hash set. All right. Not sure why I'm getting that error, but I am. So we'll have public int author ID with a get set. All right. And now in here, each author will have simply a first name and a last name. Those are the only two properties that we're going to worry about putting in here. All right. So public, in fact, before we even do that, we've got to do some decorating. It's required. And again, we gave it a max length of 200, which I think is way too big, but that's okay. All right. And then we're going to basically do the same thing. So I'm going to copy it, but we're going to make some changes after I copy it. Whoops. Try that again. All right. So this will be for the last name. All right. And it'll have the same max length, but we're going to put a remote on here. All right. And what I mean is we're going to have some additional fields in here. We'll have the first name in there as well. So this is going to be last name in just a moment. All right. How that error is gone. But the other thing that we have to worry about in here is the operation. In other words, are we adding a new record? Are we deleting an existing record? Are we updating an existing record? So we're going to come in here and put in remote, and we're going to have a routine that's going to be called check author. Again, it'll be in a controller validation. All right. And again, that will be in an area called admin. All right. And we'll have some additional fields here. So let me put those in. So after admin, first name and something we're going to call operation. Move this over, right? And that'll be the last name. Now, we need a read-only property. We've done this thing before where we've got a full name, so let's put that in. And that simply is going to be a concatenation of the first name, followed by a space, followed by the last name. Again, nothing really new there. All right, and we will have a single navigation property here. And you'll notice now when I put this in, once I spell it correctly, and I put in books, I don't get any errors. All right, now I can look in here and I can tell I still have errors. I think we're going to flush those out fairly quickly. All right, so again, this is our author. So we have come in and we first came in and added genre. And when I look in here, all my genre errors look like they're gone. All right, so I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to close the genre. Then we did book. All right, and again, when you look in here, all of my errors are gone. All right, so I can close that one. And now we just came in and we did author, and that one doesn't have any errors either. All right, so that's good. So right now we've got our 3 files in here that are going to have our tables. Now I'm still not sure why this is giving me an error. We'll look at it in just a moment. But before we do, all right, I want to create these files. You already have these files. So what I'd like you to please do is to go to the, I'm going to remove mine right now. I'd like you to go to your email, find this. Again, it was called last bookstore data update.zip. So grab that and save it just to wherever you save things. With me, it'll be the desktop. All right.
Mr. Scott, when did you
Yes.
send that one? I have the 4 students and the models.zip
Okay.
that you sent this week.
I'll tell you right now. Let's see. It was sent, should have been sent. I'll resend it just so everybody has it. I'd rather do that. So in fact, I'll forward it, and that way it'll keep this. So make sure I get a copy. All right. Hopefully you're getting it right now.
All right, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So like I said, I just took it and saved it right here. There, where is it? Well, I'll do it right now. Maybe I didn't. So let's take this. I'm going to do a save as. I'm going to save it to my desktop. All right. Yeah, I'll replace what's there. That's totally fine. It's the same file. There. Well, I probably saved it to documents, so let's double check. I did not. So where is it? There it is. Last bookstore, data update, etc. Now, I may have it on here again, and that's fine, but I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to extract it. All right. And it should, there it is. Before we put this in, I want to quickly go over this file. So it has 4 files in it. All right. Why I put it in like this, I don't know. But it shouldn't matter. Open up the one that says last bookstore data update. All right. And I'm going to open up each one of these files at the same time here. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is going to sound a little weird, but you'll have to take my word for it that it'll work. Okay. With each one of these 4 files, you have to make 2 changes because I saved them before I made the changes. So where this says BSV1 right there, change it to bookstore. And also change it under the namespace to bookstore. This is going to help us big time in just a couple minutes. So make sure with both of them. Now this one that I brought up first is the author one. All right. Then next, here's the genre. I've got to make the same change. So bookstore, bookstore. All right, so that's the second one. Next, I'm going to change the books. Same thing. Bookstore and bookstore. All right, and save that. And finally, my book authors, the same thing. All right. And we actually should have done this probably in our last test. All right. And the reason I'm saying that is we're going to really be cleaning up our context file by taking each one of these and putting them in their own file. Now, take a look at what's right here. All right. What is that? Well, this is basically what we're saying here is if you look, many authors and many books. So what we're establishing right here is our many to many relationship. Now, what's interesting about this is we did not, repeat, we did not create a class that was called bookauthor.cs. We don't have to. All right, we're just going to fill in the data and it's going to create what it needs for us. All right, so that is that one. So again, so this book has got this ID and that just goes from 1 on. But you'll notice when you look in here, these are all different because we've got about 75 or 80 different authors. All right, but we've got 108 different books. So these are all unique. These are not unique. All right. So that's the first one. We'll worry about what to do with that in just a second. Now, next. Okay. This in here is books. All right. And you'll notice, so we had this, has many, with many, using, etc. And we have, when we go over to books, we've got almost the same thing. Has one with many. All right. So every one genre can have many different books, but every one book only corresponds to one genre. Now, to be honest with you, that's not really the way it is. Because, for example, let's say that I've got a genre that's called romance, and I've got another genre that's called action. It's possible that the same book could have in it both action and romance. We're not doing it like that. we're basically setting it up so that every one book only has one genre. The other thing that's important is this line right here. What this line says is if you try to remove a genre, and there are existing books under that genre, an exception will be thrown. All right, so if you kind of look at it like genre is the parent and books are the children of that parent, you can't have orphan children. All right. And that's not the best way to put it, but believe it or not, when I learned this years ago, that's how I learned it. All right. So what we're saying with that restrict that's right there is, again, you cannot remove a genre if that genre has books in it. Now, what if you wanted to? Then you wouldn't use the word restrict. There's other words that you can use. For example, you can use the word cascade. And what that means is when you remove the parent, remove all of the children. That's pretty, extreme when you think about it. But what that does is it makes sure that you don't have any books that don't have a genre associated with them. Now, what if you don't care? So what if you want to remove the genre, you want the books to remain, and you don't care that they don't have a genre associated with them? Then you can set that to null. That would mean that you'd have one or more books that are not under any genre. All right. Now, could that be dangerous? It depends on the application. We're just not going to let it happen here. All right. And you'll notice also, we call this entity here, right there. So we call it entity here, and we call it entity here with the has data. When we've done this in the past, we've just had this, and we didn't have entity.has data. We had the name of our DB set, but we're being more generic here, and it'll work just fine. So again, when you look here, each book will have an ID, a title, a genre ID, a price, an image, and a summary. But remember, these two fields are not required. So it would be possible to add a new book that didn't have these things. All right. Then when we look at the next one here, when we look at this one, all right, this right here, then this is our genres. Every genre has an ID and a name, and that's it. And you'll see what I did with the genre name is I just concatenated together in lowercase everything in the ID that was in the name. And I did that throughout. Believe it or not, that's a fairly common practice to do that. So this again is our seed data. And then finally, over here, for the authors, each author has an ID, has a first name, and has a last name. In the earlier copy, the one that was called last data or whatever it was, that garbage that I sent you, a couple of these, I don't know how I did it, but like where it said first name, there was a W right there in a couple of the records. I don't know how that happened. I don't know why that happened. I should have caught that. I didn't, but it was blowing up when I was trying to build it because I was giving it a name that didn't exist in the database. All right, so this is what we're going to do first. The order in which we do these really and truly doesn't matter, but I've decided I'm going to do the genre first. So there it is. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, all right. Well, there's my genre. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go back into Visual Studio here, and where we are right here, all right, under models, I'd like you to create a new class. So add a class, call it configure genres.cs. Hit enter. remove everything that's in here. We don't normally do this, but remove it and come in and replace it with everything that's in here. All right. Now, I'm going to quick whiz my way through here, but there should not be any errors. I went through this and looked through it a couple times. So there are no errors in here. So this is the seed data for our genres. I don't remember how many genres there are. Not to be funny, I don't care. There must be at least 20 or so. All right, so that's the first one. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and what you should notice, you don't have to do this yet, but now if I go back to here and I take this one that's got configure genres and I uncomment it, all right, well, it shouldn't have given me an error. Generate class configure genre. Oh, because I spelled it wrong. There we go. There. So now it's not an error any longer. All right. Plus, we can also uncomment this one and this one and this one because we did those. All right. So we now have got that in. So let's do books next. So right mouse click on models, add a new class, call it configure books.cs. All right, remove everything that's in it. Go back over to here into the file again that I gave you. All right, copy all of it and paste it back in. And again, there shouldn't be, now that I'm looking, of course, now it's showing me errors. Why is it showing me errors? It says book does not contain something for genre ID. Let's go back and look. I'm going to go back into my genre here. All right. And there's genre ID, public string genre ID. It is right there. So let me see if we can figure out why that didn't work. Genre ID. And in here, Genre ID. So what would be the problem with that? That's a good question. Book does not contain it. So let's go back to book. All right, did we put genre ID in here? It looks like I left it out. All right, again, you know this already. I do enough screw ups that when I read these, books on how to teach, etc., they say stuff like, occasionally make a mistake like this. So we've got here, enter a book genre, all right? But where we had that should have been genre ID, all right? We've already got genre down here. So I goofed up, we should make that genre ID. That should get rid of all the errors that we have in the other file. So file, save all. All right, I'm going to go back to my book configure books file, and all of those errors are now gone. All right, and you'll notice we have 108 books. All right, file, save all. All right, now I can go back. You don't have to do this yet, but I'm going back to my bookstore context. And now for the books file, that's commented out or uncommented. Now that works. So next, I'm going to go in and do authors. All right, so again, under models, right mouse click, add class, configure author.cs. Again, remove what's there, go back out and copy everything in. There's our authors. And we have 78 different authors. Paste that in. Good news is right now, at least, it's not showing me any errors. All right. And again, as you can see, every author has an ID. Every author has a first name. Every author has a last name. We don't have anything special here like we did with books, a one-to-many. All right. This is just an authors table. So I'm going to do another file, save all. I'm going to go back to my context file. And I'm going to uncomment the one for authors. All right. So now I've got 3 of them that are working. All right. So let's get back to our last one. So we're going to, again, right mouse click, and we're going to add. All right. And it'll be a class again. And this will be configure book authors.cs. All right. Again, get rid of all the garbage in there. I should even say garbage. It's not. All right. Go back into here. And copy it all in. All right. Again, I don't see any errors there. Looks like everything is cool. So I'm going to do a file, save all. I'm going to go back into my bookstore context file, take the last one that's here. All right. Those are all working now. Let's fix this to see whatever the heck this was. I'm going to remove this and put it back in again. So I'm going to say public bookstore context. And what do we have in there? That DB context. Okay. And all that other good stuff. I don't remember what comes next. Let me quick look. All right. It's DB context options. All right. And this should be, I believe it's bookstore context. I think it goes like this. Okay. Then we've got options. All right. Nothing new there. All right. We need our colon, base, options, paren. All right. It's still giving me an error right there. So let's see if we can figure out why. Bookstore context. Bookstore context. Bookstore context. Spell the same every time. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at one of them in a different database and see if I did screw up someplace. All right, so let's go back to what we did with the quarterly sales. This one worked, so I'm going to grab that one, see if we can fix what's in there. Oh, you know what the error is? I'm asking you, Grant, do you know what the error is?
No, I don't. Oh,
That's what the error is. All right. So now we have, it says in here, the namespace, All right, so let's look at that, bookstore contacts. This will be adding a using statement. All right, just added that. So now, right now, there are no errors, there are no warnings. All right, so I'm going to come in and do a file, save all. I am going to remove, or close, I should say, close everything. And I'm going to come in and bring in my package manager console. And we're going to do, we have no migrations in here, so we're going to do one right now. So I'm going to add a migration. Whoops. Try that in here. Add migration. I always call mine initial setup for the first one. This should work with it without a problem. We'll see. Build failed. Okay. It didn't. So I'll tell you what, it's 2:20. I've been keeping you for an hour. I'm going to try to figure out during the break why this failed. All right. And then we'll pick it up and we'll get this done and finish up the rest of chapter 12. It is 2:21. Let's come back at 2:35, please. All right, it is 2:35. I was thinking about it. Now, I could be wrong here, but I think we have a very simple fix, and that is I'm first going to do a file save all, then I'm going to do a rebuild solution. All right, let me close this and see if this works. Says it was a success. All right, now I'm going to go back into my package manager console and again try to do just what we did before. We add migration. Son of a gun. This is the worst kind of build failed message that you can get just because of the fact that there's no description. You know, it's not telling you what went wrong. Now, normally in the past, when I get that, that's usually what the problem is. If I go back and I build it, you know, it says configuration does not, let's see what that says. It says configuration genres does not have this in. Okay, what does that mean? I'll tell you right now what it means. All right, let's go back to configure genres. And it could be a spelling error. Config, oh boy. I'll tell you what my error is. Let's go back to the context file. Look what I called it. Not there, but somehow it got called GRNE someplace. Probably when I go back into my context, did I misspell it here? No, I didn't misspell it there. Somewhere in here, it is misspelled. There it is. There is a configure genres file in here. I don't know how I even got that. So let me delete that. I don't know, maybe that's the one I just put in there. All right, but I'm looking in here now to make sure. Configure author, and that actually should have been authors. So I'm going to change the name of that. So I'm going to right mouse click where it's, I'm going to click on it where it's configure author right here. And I'm going to say rename. It's already correct, so I'm just going to hit enter. And it should have, it didn't change it there, so I'll manually change it. All right, so I've got configure authors, configure book authors, configure books, configure genres. All right, those are all correct. So let's go back to the configure genres here. Genre, genre, genre. All right, which says now I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to go look at every place I'm referring to genre, see if there's a chance I misspelled it. Author shouldn't even have anything with genre in there. Well, let's try it again. File, save all. I'm going to do another build, rebuild solution, see if it gives me an error again. It says it succeeded. Okay, it succeeded. Did yours succeed or did yours fail?
Yes, my migration succeeded.
Good. All right. says there's already an object named authors in the database, so it doesn't like something. That's fine. We'll fix it right away. So fail to execute the command on authors. What does that mean? Well, with mine, not yours, if yours worked, fantastic. But I'm going to refresh here. I'm going to go back to databases. I'm going to find my bookstore. There it is. I'm going to delete it. All right. And in fact, I've got a bookstore too. I don't know, that might have been from a year ago. I'm going to delete that. And I've even got a books DB, and I'm going to delete that. And I've got a BS, which I think was that also. So I'm going to delete that. Finally, I'm going to delete the one that says BN Books. That's everything I can see in there that has anything to do with books. All right. Then I'm going to come back to here. And I'm going to remove my migration. I'm going to re-add my migration. And I'm going to try to do my update database and see if it comes through this time. That looks a little bit better. All right, so let's refresh here, take a quick look. There's bookstore. There's our tables. So you can see, looking at this, that we now have, if I look at the data, I don't know how many are in here. All right. But there's somewhere around 25, I would guess. Our books, again, we have 108 of them. This looks a little funky because in here I've got the path to where the images are. All right, and the summary is pretty long too. That's why it looks a little weird. The authors, so there's 108 books. I believe there's like 78 authors. All right. And with our author book, I don't know why it made a book. It should have made a books, but that's okay. All right. I've got these. So everything is now set up. And I want to tell you, this may mean nothing to you, Grant. It may mean nothing to the other people in the class, but I want to tell you why I did this. All right. Last year, I talked with Evan and I told him I did not like the book project. We were both teaching the class at the time, and I did not like the bookstore website that was in there. And he was like, well, so what do you suggest? I said, I want to make my own. And I did. All right. And believe it or not, I used it, but he didn't. And I want to get something, because if you hopefully you can tell I put a lot of work into actually doing this. All right. So that's what we'll use when we get to chapter 13. So with that said, that's all we're doing in here for this. So let's go back to our book now.
Mr. Scott, real quick,
Sure.
I got a strange error. It said that the connection string property has not been initialized when I tried to do my database.
All right.
Have you seen that before?
No, I have not. Let's very quickly just do this. Here's what's going on. Initially, you defined CM. All right. Well, they're doing it differently, but that's okay. Was initialized. But in your button event, it worked perfectly. And then in your finally block, so it's not working in the other function. Every time you run this, that doesn't help us at all. I would say go back and make sure that your connection string is correct. Make sure that in your connection string, when you defined your context, that you defined it in exactly the same way that you defined it in your bookstore context file. And if you say, yeah, I did that and they are the same, I believe you. Then I would drop the database, remove the database, and try to do a new migration. So I would do a remove migration, and then I would do another add migration. So here,
Okay.
this is a different one. See, there's different places you can set this. So the problem is looking for it in here. Somebody had to have written their program the way we've been writing our program in order for us to be able to use what's in here.
Right.
So we could look and look. Now, if you do all that and you go, I did all that, nothing worked. All right. Then save your thing out there. We should have the same database. So save your project out there and I'll take a look at it. All right. I promise as
Okay.
soon as class is over, I'll be happy to take a look at it.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. I'm going back to the book. Now, in here, what they did for the first, we went up before up to page 468, which was right here. All right. So I don't think we have to go over anything in the entity classes. Again, the configuration classes provide you with a way that you can take your on model creating and just, for lack of better words, include other classes. All right. So we are able to take and partition out our seed data into 3 different classes. One that held our author data, one that held our book data, one that held our genre data. In addition, we created another class, all right, that was going to be used for our many-to-many relationship. Now, you may remember this, you may not. I don't know. I think you had me for that class, but I don't know how much of it we went over. But for example, if you're working with MySQL and you've got, let's just assume, and maybe I guess I showed you this the other day, you would have made a jump or a junction table, all right, which would have had the primary keys of both of the uh, 2 tables that have the many-to-many relationship. Well, you know what? That's kind of what we did. But we didn't make a new class to become a new table. What we made was just the seed data. And then somehow, magically, all right, it was brought together for us by the stuff that we put in there. So in other words, if I can find it, see, this is book. I think it's here. All right. We have put together, when you look at this, these are the primary keys of both those tables. All right. That's exactly what we did. All right. And then we used basically the equivalent of some Fluent API code in here. And here is where we set up the relationship. All right. Why they do it like that, as opposed to the way it's done in other languages, I couldn't tell you. All right. I mean, maybe there's a really good article someplace online that explains it. But again, for whatever reason, good, bad, right, wrong, it doesn't matter. One of the things that differentiates these different relational database management systems from one another is how they handle different things. I don't know. Did you find anything else that looked funky in it when you went back and looked?
No, I didn't, and it won't let me do the remove migration either. It's giving me that error.
The same error?
Yeah.
All right. Well, what you can do if you want to is you can go back into your migration file to the folder, right mouse click and just manually delete it. All right. It's really not going to hurt anything to do that, or it should not hurt anything to do that.
Okay.
All right. But again, I'm not sure. I've not seen that error. You can tell by the way I was looking for it, that no, I have not. But that doesn't, it could be a very common error.
Mhm.
All right. So we had our configure files again, and then the next several pages, this is how they built the authors, but notice they have, you'll notice in just a bit, they have very few authors. All right. This was their books. This was their genres. Again, mine, instead of 10, I made mine 50. All right. They've got a lot smaller genre ID than I do. I have not even looked at their data. Here with the context class, this is what we added. What I did wrong up here earlier that didn't work was, remember, just this. I don't know why I forgot to do that, but you need, Bing, it should kind of hit in your head when you create a context class, add this first, using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, then immediately go in and inherit from DB context, and then immediately come in and write your constructor. All right, if we'd have done that, we wouldn't have had any of those errors. All right, then we added our DB sets, but rather than putting in our seed data, we told it that we've got configuration files, configure genres, configure books, configure authors, and configure book authors. All right, that's going to hold our seed data for us. And then there they were. All right, so that brings us up to here. Now, I'm not going to do this, but we could. What we've been doing all semester has been code first. You already heard that. You can go the other way as well. So in other words, had we gone in and built those tables first, we could now turn around and build the associated classes. As they mentioned right there, this approach is what's known as database first development. Now it says to do this, you can use this command that you're going to end up running from the package manager console to do this. All right. It says they're going to show it in the next thing, so that's fine. It says it's best practice to store the connection string in the app.settings.json file. If you don't want to do that, you can. We talked about this a little bit in the last chapter. It is permissible to put the connection string in your context file, and you put it in what's called the configure method in there. I wouldn't recommend doing that. We've been doing it this way all semester. All right. Notice that it says here the data annotations parameter indicates whether or not you want to perform configuration by adding data attributes. All right. Then there's a force parameter, indicates whether or not you want to overwrite existing files. As it says, this is useful if you try doing it and it doesn't work. This is kind of the equivalent, for lack of better words, of doing a remove migration. So if you run this, again, from the package manager console, you're going to end up running something like this. All right. Now, could we go over this and do it ourselves? Yes. Could we get it to work? Honest to goodness, I have no doubt we could. But we've already gone and done enough stuff this semester where I think, hope, and pray that students are finally getting to where they have a comfort level with doing code first databases. I don't want to throw that into an uproar by doing this. But you'll notice one thing in here, that when it does it this way, it creates a folder that's called data layer. And in that data layer folder, that's where all of your stuff is. I'm kind of surprised they call it data layer, but I do want to mention something to you. All right. And that is, we will start tomorrow, as I mentioned. I'm not going to go real long. It's a Friday. So let's say we start at 12:15 and we go till 2:15. But what you're going to notice is, for lack of better words, our models folder is going to be a lot bigger than it has been. What we're going to do is we're going to create different, three different folders in there. All right. We will have one folder. The first one that we create will be called domain models. And that's kind of like the one here that's called data layer. All right. There's not exactly something totally significant about the name, except it's one that's quite often used. Domain models. All right. Then we're going to create another one. And that next one that we create will be called data access. And we're going to add some stuff in there we have not done before, such as we are going to end up using in there what are called repositories. All right. And again, it's like if you say, geez, I don't know what any of that stuff is, you don't exactly have to worry about it right now. All right. And then finally, we will create yet another folder. All right. And that folder, I believe we call it DTOs, which are data transfer objects. We will go over all that stuff. All right. But giving it 2 hours means that we won't finish it tomorrow. I don't even think we'd finish it tomorrow if we went and started at 12:05 and went till 3:55 without a break. I don't think we'd finish it. So the reason I'm telling you that is we will finish it up on Monday then, and then we'll jump in on Tuesday to the chapter 13 when we do our own project. When we do our own project, all of this stuff, at least hopefully, will become much clearer. I've been writing it and I've actually had really good luck with what I've done so far. But there's a lot of things we haven't talked about yet. All right, some of them are fairly simple, such as if you think about it, when we went and listed all of our products on the hot tests, we got 40 products in there. Would have been nice if we could have set it up so that we could have done some pagination. So maybe we'd show 10 products on a page and we would have had 4 pages. We'll learn how to do that too. So that's what we'll be getting into, is what I'm telling you. All right. Then they tell you how you work with this. Again, I'm skipping this for right now. All right. Because this is the database first stuff. So I want to jump into here. Page 480, how to work with data in a database. All right. Now, one thing I think, and I hope that people learned when they took the AWD 1100 class with me. And again, I believe you had me for that class. In fact, I believe all 6 of you in this class had me for that. One of the things that we did in that class is we went over databases. That was the intro to databases. And we did 2 things in there. All right. The first thing that we did was we went over some MySQL stuff. MySQL, in my opinion, for whatever that is or is not worth, is much easier than working with SQL Server. I find it much more straightforward. All right. Then we went in and looked a little bit. All right. We looked a little bit at some SQL Server stuff. Now, Grant, you'll have to answer this question for me because I don't know. Were you in the class where we went and did that Garth Brooks website? Were you in that class?
Yes.
Okay. So you did start working with it already in there. Now, that was working with C sharp, but it was working with C sharp that was not using ASP.NET. All right. And so what's the distinction? Well, hopefully, one of the things you've noticed is that since ASP.NET is designed to create C sharp applications that run on the web, all semester we've been doing things like using CSS, using Bootstrap. At least we looked at some of the jQuery stuff, etc. So we looked at a bunch of stuff in there that we did not use in the C sharp class. Because in C sharp, those were database applications we were making. They were not web applications. They were not C sharp ASP.NET web applications. They were C sharp database applications that were not designed to run, all right, in a web browser. The reason I'm bringing that up is one of the things I went over with you guys at the time, and again, it was half a year or more ago, is we talked a little bit in there about LINQ. You may or may not remember that. We went over a few LINQ exercises. Most of the LINQ exercises that we went over were fairly simplistic. The ones that are in here, the ones that we've been using thus far, all right, have been more complex. So if we take a look in here, all right, there's the context. You know that every time that we've had to go in and do work in a controller where we are doing work with a database, we have said private, the name of our bookstore or whatever it is, context get set. We have done that, and we have done that and made that a private variable, and we have also gone in and made a constructor where we bring that in. All right, nothing new there. But what they're saying in here is, okay, the context is what you basically are going to use, and you're going to use it when you want to not necessarily manipulate, but when you want to perform operations on a database. In our case, if you want to perform CRUD operations. So they show you here how you can do that and break it up into two, and then they show you it again, all right, how you can do it in one statement. The takeaway right there, as it says, this first statement right here is creating a query. This is basically the equivalent of what we did in a language like MySQL. This is the equivalent of saying select star from books. That's basically what that's saying. All right. But remember that the way that this works is it doesn't actually run the query until you do the to list. And the reason for that is it actually kind of is running the query, but it's giving you back the data in a format that's not compatible with what we're doing. So the to list basically finishes the operation up for us. All right, we've been typically doing it like this. All right, which says run it. All right, set it up and then run it. Now, a couple things that we've looked at in here, and maybe one we have not. We've done order bys, and the only difference between the order by and the order by descending is the fact that descending is in reverse order. All right, but you'll notice again that LINQ is a Microsoft product. All right. I've said in the past before, in fact, I said this when I went over it in the AWD 1100 class. And in a way, what LINQ does is it kind of turns SQL on its head. So rather than saying select star from this, where this, all right, the select goes last. All right, in the way that you do this. Well, with what we're doing right now, all right, using LINQ to entities, which is what we're using, and LINQ to entities means what are our entities? Those are our tables, all right, that we don't even put all that stuff in, all right. Now, they've got some neat stuff in here, okay. Now, notice they run the first or default, okay, and they say you can always also do that as a find when you just ask for the first one to be returned. I'm not sure with that example that they give, syntactically, everything else, it's correct. The problem is with this one right here, all right, if it doesn't find it in there at all, it returns null. I am not sure if this second example that they're giving there does return null. I'm not saying it does. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I use the first one, even though it's a little bit more work, because when I do that, I can be assured that if it doesn't find what I'm looking for, null will be returned and the program won't blow up. All right, the where allows us to do filtering. Again, nothing surprising there. All right. And here, well, notice with the where we're putting in a condition. Again, nothing real surprising there. All right. When you filter, as it says, you can filter by multiple criteria. All right. So you can look for different things. All right. Where this starts to get a little bit quirky is right here, where it says code that gets a subset of results. All right. By default, when you're doing this stuff, you're returning everything that's in the table. But who's to say that that's what you want? All right. Maybe you don't. Maybe you only want some of the stuff that's in the table. And that's what they're getting to in here. I don't know why they give you an example with a random book other than if we use the logic that Muroc puts into their chapter 13, what it does is every time you run the program, it's got kind of a book of the day type of thing, and it'll go through your entire list and grab a book that's in there. I'm not sure if we'll do that or not. All right. The next thing are projections. All right. Again, this goes along with what I just mentioned. One way to limit the number of properties returned is to use table splitting, which they just talked about. Another way is to use projections. Notice a projection uses link select method, which we have not been using in here. Now, the reason I brought up the stuff that we did last year is we did use the select method. If you go back and look at those examples, most of them did use the select method. All right. And they talk about ways, we'll look at it in just a minute. They say one way to do it is to use anonymous types, which, as it says, are convenient and quick to work with. But remember, if something is anonymous, it's not named. So it can provide some confusion. And that's what they're saying. The second way is kind of what I started mentioning to you earlier. And that is, as it says, to use a simple data transfer object or a DTO that's designed to transfer data from one place to another. And they're going to show examples of each of them in here. All right. And I always love this when, and maybe I've mentioned this before, when Muroc, they come in and say, oh, this is simple. None of this stuff is simple. All right. I'm getting emails from some of my students in the first semester class. All right. And they're mad because they're saying this stuff is too hard. All right. I don't even know how to answer those emails. I talked to my old boss about that this morning. He's like, well, what are you telling them? Well, I provided tutors. All right. There's a tutor for that class. And the person met electronically with a tutor, didn't like them because they said they knew too much, which made me kind of laugh inside. And I said, isn't that a good thing? But we'll just leave it at that. All right. So when we look in here, notice this. So again, what are we doing? All right. As it says, first of all, it's an anonymous type. All right. Now, this, I believe, is going to return just one thing. And it says when it expects multiple things and you only give it one, you're going to get a really god-awful looking error. So as I mentioned, you might want to do something like this. Well, again, this is just adding really more complexity in here when you think about it. All right. So what do we have in here? Well, notice what they set up for their data transfer object. A value in a text. That should sound familiar, especially when you take a look at what the name of this is. And the name of it is drop down DTO. And what's a dropdown? It's a select list. All right. And they've written it like that. So when you look in here, in an ideal world, at least, all right, this that you see right here is easier to read and understand for a typical user as opposed to the way we've been doing it, where we say new select list and we put all that stuff in. Now, I'm not saying that's true, that's false. I'm not saying it at all. But what I'm saying is that's kind of the rationale behind this. All right. Then next, notice 2 techniques for getting all books and their related genres and their authors. All right. Well, the first way is the way we've been doing it. All right. Context.books, .include, then we told it to bring in the genre, and we told it to bring in the authors. All right. When you look at the next one, it's pretty much the same thing. But what we're doing now is we're naming what it is we want to use in the include in parentheses. All right. So all they're trying to do is they're trying to show you alternative methods to what we've been doing in here this semester. And again, I had this talk with the first year people. All right. And because I've gotten emails from people where they've said, all right, you teach us to do something one way, and then later you tell us about a second and a third way. And we're supposed to understand all of them. I don't get that. Well, the idea again is as a language matures and you have new upgrades and you get new versions and new releases, typically you do that because people plan on having an easier way of doing something. But that doesn't mean that the old way goes away. That means that what's recommended is that when you do new development, you do it the new way, because typically it'll be faster, it'll run faster, it'll have less code, etc. And it kind of goes along with the idea going back all the way to AWD1000 when we talked about the fact if you go through the HTML tag list of about 120 tags, you'll notice that about 10 to 20% of them are deprecated. And that's what we're talking about here. So a lot of this stuff is newer and it's replacing things that are still there and still work, but are deprecated, meaning that your new development should be doing it this way. All right, that was a very roundabout way of explaining it, but at least hopefully it made a little bit of sense. All right. Now, they say in addition to querying data, you need to be able to perform CRUD operations. We're talking so far, more than anything else, we've been doing a lot of read where we bring stuff up. All right. Yes, occasionally on some of the apps that we worked on, yes, we're able to go in and we're able to, the contact manager app, for example, you're able to add a contact, you're able to edit a contact, you're able to delete a contact. All right. Now, what they're doing though in here is they're trying to explain these things in more detail. Now, some of them, I think at least, just make sense. The add method adds a new entity to the DB set and marks it as added. And the other ones do a similar type of thing. Then when you run the save changes, it actually runs it against the underlying database. You've heard this before. We have talked about this before. All right. And notice one thing they say in here as I move this up. It says the examples that they're going to show on the next page here, they say they all perform a single action and then call save changes. That's not a requirement. But in most programming languages, when you have a lot of different adds, updates, deletes that you run as a unit, that is known as transaction database processing. And you run it as a transaction. What that means is, and the reason that that's important is when you run it like that in most database type of operations, either, so you do a bunch of adds, updates, deletes, etc., as one unit of work. Then you tell it to write it to the database. And what happens is either the entire thing succeeds, or if there's any problem, the entire thing fails, and you roll the database back so that it looks, all right, the way it did before you started. Now, they do mention here, it says you can make several calls to add, update, and remove before you call save changes. In fact, in some scenarios, it may improve efficiency. All right. Now, I don't like doing that. And I'll tell you why. It's what's explained at the end of the chapter here. Every single person in this class, you are using your machine as both a client and a server. You already know that. All right. And I've also said to you that if you were working in a real live work environment, that what you'd be doing typically is rather, when you first create something, of course, you're using your machine as the server. Once you've tested it, and once people have blessed it that have to bless it, you're going to want to put it out on a regular server. All right. I mean, that at least should make sense. All right. And what we've been doing in here all semester, all right, is we have been adding, well, typically reading, but also adding and updating and deleting. But we've never had to worry about having another user that is trying to maybe update the same record we're trying to update at the same time. We've never had issues with what's called concurrency. And that's what they discuss at the end of the chapter here. All right. I believe that when you are working on a database, you should get in, do your work, and get out. All right. As quick as you can. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, again, with this concurrency, what can you do with concurrency? All right. Well, look at it this way. In the worst case, all right, and some companies run like this. All right. Grant, you and I, Grant, we both open up the same record. We're allowed to do that. All right. Now I make a bunch of changes. Okay. And I write it. And then you make a bunch of changes and you write it. Since you were the last one to write changes, yours stick and mine get overridden. That's a terrible way of doing things because, as you can guess, it can lead to problems. All right. The other way to get around that, the better way, is to do and use what's called locking. And you can lock an entire database, meaning that if I have it open, you can't open it. Well, that's pretty harsh. You can lock on a table level. Even that's pretty harsh. You can lock on a record level, which usually makes the most sense. So if you come in, if I've got the database open and I'm working on a record and you try to work on that same record, you're not allowed to. All right. And that's what they're going to get into in here. That's why, like I said, I'm of the mindset that you do it the way they're mentioning it here. You do your add, you save changes. You do your update, you save changes. You remove, save changes. Don't do a bunch of different things. Just do one thing. All right. And then write it. All right. Says here, when it comes to updates, the second example shows how to work with a disconnected scenario because it's common with web apps. In this scenario, the edit action gets the book entity from a post request. As a result, the code in here must update the state of the entity before it calls save changes. With desktop apps, it says it's more important to use not a disconnected scenario, but a connected scenario. All right. And this just gets way too heavy. Again, we don't have to worry about either of these scenarios because, again, we are both client and server. All right. All right. So they show the ad and they'll give some examples of each one. Okay. This is not exactly the same way we've been doing it, but it's a way of doing it. And then they distinguish between doing this and doing it again. All right, there's the update and the same changes. All right, notice there's a find. They're doing the same, just the same changes. All right, they're not calling the update method right here. All right, with the connected scenario. All right, so the last thing, this is what I'd already mentioned. I'll tell you what, we've got about 10 pages. I'm going to finish this. It'll be somewhere around 3:30 and we'll just call it a period then. All right. So as it says, concurrency occurs or allows two or more users to work with a database at the same time. However, as it says, if two users retrieve and attempt to update the same entity, typically the same record or row in a table, their updates may conflict with one another. So as it says, there are two options for this. First, the worst one is what I showed you. It's last in wins. So whoever saves last, they win. The other one, as it says there, it's referred to as optimistic concurrency. And that's when you use some kind of a locking mechanism. All right. So they mention here one way to enable optimistic concurrency is to check an entire entity for changes. All right. What does that mean? That means that pretty much means that what you're locking it at is you're locking it at a table. All right. At a table level. All right. Now, do you want to do that? Again, sometimes yes. All right. Now think about when you might want to do something like that. All right. I'm going to give you an example. You may have run through this in your life. You may not have. I don't even know if it works the same way. But I remember a while back wanting to go to a concert. All right. And I went and brought up the thing with the tickets. And what it did was it came up online with a message that said, basically, for the next 1 minute and 45 seconds, you're the only one who can access these tickets. So I could buy anything that was in there. I could buy anything that was in there as long as, the tickets were available. But it froze other people out for that minute and 45 seconds, because what if we both tried to buy the same ticket in the same place? All right. And again, I don't know if it still works like that. I don't really care, but hopefully you get the idea. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about something that doesn't work like that. All right. A couple of years ago, my daughter's going to college and she's like, Dad, here's my book list. Well, yeah, Dad's supposed to buy the books. So Dad goes out onto Amazon and sees that some of the stuff that's out there, they've got new and used. So I take a couple of the used things and I put them in my cart. All right. And my daughter, I'm not making this up. This happened. My daughter calls me and says, wait a minute, Dad, for this one class, I'm not sure if we're going to use this book because a friend of mine's in the class with me and they said they're going to change the books. All right. So the bottom line is what happens is I just leave everything in the cart and I come back a half an hour later and two or three of the books that I put in there, they're no longer available because somebody has bought them during that time. So we don't have a thing in there. In that case, it's almost like a last in wins. Boom, they grabbed it, it's available. All right. But in the other scenario, it's more like optimistic concurrency. That's kind of what I wanted to say to you. Those aren't the best analogies, but it is pretty much the way that it works. Now, the good news is that as a developer, all right, this isn't stuff you're typically going to have to worry about. This is why you have a database administrator. And in fact, if you've got a big enough company, you're going to have a database administration department. And they're going to be in charge of how things like concurrency is set up. All right. And, again, I may have told you about this, but I'll always remember this, that when I had my first programming job, all right, we needed to add a new field to a table in a database. And I had to go over, we had buildings on both sides of Naperville, Illinois. So I got onto the bus that we had to take you from one location to the other. I go to the other location, I find out who the database administrator is, explain my situation to him, and his answer is, I'll think about it, which I mean, I actually kind of laughed, but I had to stifle it because he was being serious. So I get back, fine. You think about it, let me know. So I get back to the other location, I get a phone call. No, I'm not going to let you do it. And I'm like, why? I don't need to give you a reason why. So I had to go to my boss, who had to go to his boss, who eventually set it up so that we were able to actually add the field. Bottom line is this: people who are database administrators, they're the data gods. They're the ones who decide what goes in, they're the ones who decide what goes out, and they're the ones who decide how things are handled, basically. All right. So what I'm saying is, it's not that this stuff isn't important, it's darned important. But unless you get a job as a database administrator, this is not something, as far as how it's administered, that you're going to have to worry about. Now, the good news about database administrators, if you don't know this, is they're one of the highest paid jobs there is. All right. They typically start at about 150 grand a year. All right. A couple of dollars more than I make. All right. Now, when you have concurrency, all right, and as that it says, even with optimistic concurrency, if you try to do an update or a delete and it fails because of a concurrency problem, as it says, the entity framework will throw an exception. So again, when you do last in wins, you're not going to get these exceptions, but you've got, again, the opportunity for one person to override another person's data. When you have the optimistic concurrency, depending on how you've locked the system up, all right, you still can have these where two people try to manipulate something. But typically, if two people are trying to manipulate something, they're probably both going to get the same message that says this record is in use, try again later, and they'll both get kicked out. All right. That's what I wanted to say about that. So we're getting to the home stretch here. How to encapsulate your entity framework code. As it says, so far, the EF code you've seen has been in the action methods of controllers. Usually, though, this code should be in their own data layer. Now, what does that mean? Well, remember something, that what should happen in a controller is a controller should be a liaison between your model and your view. In other words, we shouldn't be putting logic in the controller. Guess what? That's what we have been doing. All right. It says, again, usually this code, as they mentioned, should be in its own data layer, meaning that we're going to be adding more stuff into our model, into our models folder. Now, it says this makes your code easier to test. Also, as mentioned, it allows you to store your data access code in a separate project. Why is that important? Because you might be able to use the same code in multiple projects. All right. Finally, as it says, it makes it possible to change your code to another framework. You'd be surprised at how many people have got to make databases, for example, a MySQL database talk with an SQL server database, talk with an Oracle database. That's the kind of thing that they're talking about right here. All right. So, as it says, the next example here will show you code for creating and using a simple data access class. All right. So again, some of the stuff that they'll be doing in here, the database centric things that you're doing, are going to be pushed off, and they're going to be pushed off into this data layer that is typically in the model class. All right. So we're, for lack of better words, we're kind of dumbing down. All right. We're kind of dumbing down the controller, for lack of better words. All right. And that's kind of what they talk about in here. So when they say it's good practice to encapsulate the code, what they're saying is don't put it out in the open with a controller. Rather, code data access classes. All right, it says to make them more flexible, you can code them with methods that accept link expressions as arguments. All right, now the rest of the stuff that's in here is very link centric. What do I mean? Well, if we look in here as an example, they use things like skip and take. All right, so what does that mean? Well, you would use things like skip and take if you wanted to put in something like I mentioned earlier, like pagination. All right. So we would tell if we've got 100 records and we're saying to show 10 records on each page, then we've got to kind of keep count. And when we reach record 11, we say, nope, I can't print you on this page. I've got to start with a new page type of an idea. And that's kind of what they're getting to in here right now. All right. All right. This is pretty much the end. Let me double check. Yeah. All right. So the last thing that they discuss in here, as it says, is to use a repository pattern. All right. Now it says this pattern encapsulates data code within a data access layer and also uses interfaces. You may or may not remember, an interface is like a class. Interfaces, though, are not instantiated, and a class can inherit from as many interfaces as it wants to or needs to inherit from. All right. So what we are going to get into here is using repositories. Now, you can have one repository with many methods. You can have many repositories with many methods. Now, as it says here, the first example presents a simple generic interface. It has 6 methods. All right. It says when you use the repository pattern, you should have one repository for each one of your entities. All right, what does that mean? It says, for example, the bookstore app shouldn't use one big bookstore repository. Rather, it should have at least 3, one for books, one for authors, one for genres. This is the kind of thing that we're going to be getting into next. So as the author mentions in here, one way to do this is to have each repository implement an iRepository interface. What does that mean? That means if there is data that must be shared between these different repositories, that you put it in an iRepository interface, and then the other repositories can basically inherit from that. All right. And I think at least that's one of the examples that they show in here. All right. Now, when I first read this, it's like, geez, my head was spinning. All right. But there's the iRepository, and it's going to handle the generic stuff. Then notice we've got a repository in here that's inheriting from iRepository. This isn't going to make a lot of sense until you see it in action. The good news, if you'd call it that, the good news is twofold. Number one, when we do this trips log update that we will start tomorrow, we will be doing this. The bad news is until you've done this once or twice, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I am bringing this in also to the project that we're going to do. All right, after we get done with chapter 13, we're going to start on that project. I still want to get over the material on 14, 15, 16, and we will, but we're going to spend the majority of our time on this project. All right, so read that, and like I said, it might make sense to you, it might not make sense to you. And the last thing I'd mention then is if we come over here to projects, all right, this is where we're going to start tomorrow. So as it says, you may remember this TRIPS project we did back in chapter 8. All right, it says we're going to update it so it uses multiple related entities rather than a single TRIP entity. All right, so what does that mean? All right, this looks very similar, believe it or not, to what we had before. All right, but okay, and now we're able to add a whole bunch of things that we want to do. And notice we can just pick out the ones if we have a list, and we're able to manage what we're working on. So what we will start with tomorrow, I'm not going to read to you because the first thing that's in there, the first 2 bullets that are in there, probably the first 3 bullets, all right, are going to come in and they're going to talk about the fact that we are going to come in and, as I said, we are going to have 3 different folders in our models folder. All right. And that's where we're going to start. Well, actually, tomorrow we'll start by bringing up the package manager and adding that stuff, making a change into our app settings.json file to add a trip log context. They ask you to call this database trip log 2 as opposed to the trip log that we did before. All right. So we're going to get through as much of this as we can in 2 hours tomorrow. All right. Maybe we'll go till 2:30, but I don't want to go any more than that. All right. And then we'll pick it up and ideally, at least, finish it up on Monday. All right. That was a lot to throw at you. So I will see you tomorrow, hopefully at 12:05. I hope you're feeling better. All right. I'll talk to you then.
Thank you. Talk to you then.